The barrel of the gun was cold against my temple, but the sweat pouring down my face was scalding. "Doctor," the woman hissed, her voice a jagged blade of ice. "My name is Jocks. 10 minutes ago, I was a predatory tow truck driver, looking for an easy score on a dark street. Now, I'm the wheelman for a cartel executioner, and the clock on the dashboard says I have exactly 8 minutes to live." It started with a matte black SUV parked illegally behind a shipping yard. No plates, no vang in the window, just a shadow with wheels. In my business, a car like that is a payday. I hooked the frame and hoisted it onto my flatbed without a second thought. I was halfway down the block when the door to my cab was ripped open. I didn't see a face. I just felt the cold steel of a 9mm and the smell of expensive perfume. "You just stole $1 billion insurance policy, Jocks," she said, her obsidian eyes fixed on the road ahead. Her name was Elena. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like a CEO who had just decided to liquidate her competition. Literally, behind my truck, the SUV rattled on the chains. "If this truck stops moving before we reach the warehouse at Pier 41, a remote detonator will level 2 city blocks, including us." I floored it. The heavy diesel engine of the truck screamed, the turbo whistling like a siren. I've spent years being the guy everyone hates, the one who takes your car and ruins your night. But tonight, I was the only thing standing between the city and a crater. "Why me?" I gasped, weaving through a line of midnight traffic. "You were the only one fast enough to hook it," she replied, "and you were the only one expendable enough to die with it." A siren wailed behind us. A state trooper had seen me jump a red light. "Don't you dare slow down," Elena commanded, her hand moving to the gear shift. She slammed my hand away and pushed the stick forward. The truck lurched, the speedometer climbing past 80. A tow truck isn't meant to be a getaway car. The weight of the SUV was dragging us toward the curb, the chains groaning under the lethal pressure. "The bridge is blocked. Construction," I yelled as we approached the river. The orange cones were a wall of plastic. Elena didn't flinch. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet, the screen glowing with a red digital countdown. 5:12. "Go through the barrier," she said. "The cement hasn't cured. If we get stuck, I'll shoot you before the bomb does." I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white and aimed for the gap. Wet cement sprayed the underside of the truck like gray blood. We were fishtailing the massive flatbed swinging out like a pendulum. I corrected the slide, the tires smoking as they found traction on the steel grates of the bridge. 4:30, Elena noted, her voice eerily calm. "The cartel isn't the only one watching us, Jocks. The rival syndicate has a sniper on the clock tower. They want this SUV to blow up right here." As if on cue, the windshield shattered. A spiderweb of cracks appeared inches from my head. I ducked, the truck swerving toward the railing. "Keep your head up," Elena roared, firing her own weapon out the window. This sound was deafening in the small cab. I pushed the gas pedal into the floorboards, my heart hammering a rhythm of pure, unadulterated terror. I wasn't a driver anymore. I was a target. We cleared the bridge, but the tires were shredded. The truck was limping on its rims, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. It looked like a comet of iron and fire. 2 miles to Pier 41, Elena said, her eyes fixed on the GPS. "If we lose another tire, we won't have the momentum to clear the gates." I looked at the rearview mirror. 3 black sedans were closing the gap, their headlights like the eyes of hungry wolves. "Hit the winch," Elena commanded. I looked at her like she was insane. "The winch while we're moving?" "Release the tension on the SUV. Let it slide back." I hit the hydraulic lever. The matte black SUV shifted, its weight pulling the truck's nose into the air. The chains screeched, then snapped. The SUV slid down the bed, its heavy frame slamming into the lead sedan like a battering ram. The sedan was crushed instantly, tumbling over the median in a ball of fire. But the SUV was still attached to the truck by the emergency cable. It was dragging behind us like a lethal anchor. 2:15, Elena shouted over the roar of the wind. The pier was inside a rusted skeleton of iron against the black water, but the gate was locked with a heavy industrial chain. "I can't break that. Not on rims." "You don't have to break it," Elena said, grabbing a heavy flare gun from the floor. "You just have to aim for the fuel tank of the truck in front of the gate." She was talking about a parked tanker. It was a suicide mission. "Elena, we'll go up with it. Better to be a fireball than a memory, Jocks. Now, steer." She fired. The flare arced through the air, a streak of crimson light that found its mark. The explosion was a wall of heat that lifted the front of the tow truck off the ground. We flew through the fireball, the world turning orange and deafening. I felt the skin on my arms blister, but I didn't let go of the wheel. We crashed through the remnants of the gate, the truck sliding on its belly across the wet concrete of the pier. The matte black SUV was still there, the timer at 0:45. We came to a halt inches from the edge of the pier. The water of the harbor was black and unforgiving. "Out! Get out!" Elena yelled. We dove from the cab, the truck groaning as it settled. She grabbed me by the collar and dragged me behind a concrete pylon. "The freighter's coming," she gasped. A massive, lightless ship emerged from the fog. We have to get the SUV onto that deck. Now. She hit a button on her tablet. The winch on my ruined truck hissed to life, dragging the SUV the last few feet toward a lowered cargo net. 005, 004. The SUV was hoisted into the air just as the freighter's engines roared. Elena looked at me, her face covered in soot and blood. You just saved the city, Jocks. She looked at the shadows emerging from the warehouse. Now, let's see if I can save you from my bosses. The freighter's shadow swallowed us as the SUV disappeared into its massive hold. The timer hit 0, but there was no explosion, just the heavy, metallic thud of a vault door sealing shut. The freighter's jammer had worked. Elena stood up, her hand still resting on the grip of her pistol. She looked at my ruined truck, then at me. The delivery is complete, but the trail isn't cold. My bosses don't like witnesses, Jocks, even the talented ones. I stood up, my legs shaken like a newborn colt's. I didn't ask for this. I was just doing my job. I shouted, the adrenaline finally turning into a cold, hollow fear. From the darkness of the warehouse behind us, 4 silhouettes emerged. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing tactical gear and night vision goggles. These weren't businessmen. They were a cleanup crew. Elena stepped in front of me, her posture shifting into something protective. He stays with me, Elena said, her voice projecting with a command that made the lead man pause. He was a giant of a human, his face scarred by a jagged white line that ran from his ear to his chin. The instructions were clear. Elena, the giant growled, retrieve the asset, eliminate the variable. He's a variable? Elena didn't blink. He's the only reason the asset isn't a cloud of dust over the city. I'm claiming him as an asset. The giant looked at me with a look of pure, clinical disgust. He's a tow truck driver from the south side. He has no value. Elena walked toward him, the distance between them crackling with tension. He drove a flatbed on its rims through a sniper's nest and a fireball. He has more value than half your team. Now, tell the boss I'm bringing him in, or you can explain why I had to put a bullet in your head for insubordination. The giant hesitated, then stepped aside with a grunt. You're making a mistake, Elena. Sentiment is a luxury we can't afford. He signaled to his team, and they faded back into the shadows. Elena turned to me, the intensity in her eyes finally softening. Don't get comfortable, Jocks. Asset is just another word for slave in my world. But it's better than corpse. We need to move. The police will be crawling over this pier in 3 minutes. She led me to a sleek, dark blue motorcycle hidden behind a stack of shipping crates. Get on and keep your head down. I climbed on behind her, my hands gripping the seat. We took off, the bike weaving through the industrial maze with a speed that made the truck's run feel like a crawl. We weren't just running from the police. We were running from a world I never knew existed, a world where $1 billion secret was worth more than a city block. We reached a safe house in the hills, a glass-walled fortress disguised as a luxury villa. Elena didn't use a key. She used a retinal scanner. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of expensive cedar. Sit down. Bleed on the rug if you have to. But don't move, she commanded. She went to a cabinet and pulled out a first aid kit. As she cleaned the glass out of my shoulder, I realized her hands were finally shaking. The mask was slipping. Why did you save me? I asked, the silence of the villa feeling heavier than the noise of the chase. She stopped, the tweezers hovering over a piece of windshield glass. Because for 10 minutes, you were the only honest thing in my life, she whispered. Everyone I know is a liar or a killer. You were just a guy trying to protect his truck. She looked at me, her obsidian eyes reflecting the moonlight. And because I need someone who knows how to survive when the rules don't apply? A chime echoed through the room, a soft, melodic sound that felt entirely too peaceful for the situation. A screen on the wall flickered to life. A man's face appeared. He was older, with silver hair, and a smile that looked like it had been surgically applied. Elena, I see you've brought a guest. I hope he's as useful as you claim. Elena stood up, her posture snapping back into a military straightness. He's a specialist, sir. A logistics expert. The man on the screen, the Bosch, looked at me through the camera. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. A logistics expert who hauls illegally parked cars for a living. You're losing your touch, Elena. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The rival syndicate is already tracking the freighter. We need a distraction. Something loud. Something visible. Something that says the SUV is still in the city, and I think your new friend is the perfect decoy. Elena's face went pale. Sir, he's exhausted. He's wounded. The boss ignored her. He's a variable, Elena. You said so yourself. If he survives the night as a decoy, he earns his place. If not, he's served his purpose. The screen went black. Elena looked at me, the weight of the betrayal visible in her shoulders. They're going to use you as bait, Jocks. They're going to put you in a decoy SUV and let the syndicate hunt you through the streets. I'm not doing it, I said, standing up. I've done my part. Let me go. Elena grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. If you walk out that door, the giant and his team are waiting for you. This is the only way, Jocks. If you can lead the syndicate to the old refinery, we can trap them. And then, and then I can get you out for real. I have a plan, but I need you to trust me one more time. Trust you? I laughed, a jagged, bitter sound. You've been pointing a gun at my head for half the night, and I've saved your life twice, she shot back. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, silver locket. She opened it and handed me a microchip. This is the real insurance policy. The SUV was just a shell. This chip has the names of every cartel mole in the government. If anything happens to me, you get this to the reporter I have on speed dial. She was handing me the keys to the kingdom. She was making herself the variable. Why give this to me? I asked, the weight of the chip feeling heavier than the tow truck's winch. Because you're the only one who doesn't know how to play the game, she said, which makes you the most dangerous player on the board. She pulled out a set of keys for a silver SUV parked in the garage. The decoy's ready. The route is mapped. Let's go make some noise. We descended into the garage. The silver SUV was a masterpiece of armored engineering, bulletproof glass, reinforced tires, and enough horsepower to move a mountain. Elena looked at me, her hand resting on the door handle. If we make it through the next hour, Jocks, I'm taking you to a place where no one hooks cars and no one fires snipers. I looked at the city lights below, a sprawling maze of neon and shadow. Let's go, I said. I've got a pull to finish. The engine of the silver SUV didn't roar. It hummed like a predator waiting to strike. Elena handed me a tactical earpiece. This is a closed circuit. If you hear static, it means they're jamming us. If you hear me whisper Deadpool, you drive into the nearest solid object and run. I gripped the leather steering wheel, my hands finally steady. I was a tow truck driver from the south side, and I was about to lead the world's most dangerous men on a chase through my backyard. I hit the garage door opener, and the cool night air rushed in. Elena stayed behind, her silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror as I pulled onto the winding mountain road. You're live! Jocks, her voice crackled in my ear. The syndicate has picked up your signature. 3 pursuers are moving in from the north. Lead them to the warehouse district. Make them believe you're heading for the freighter. I pushed the pedal down, feeling the raw power of the armored beast. The first headlight appeared in my mirror 3 miles out. It was a high-performance bike, weaving through the lanes with terrifying speed. Contact, I muttered. A second later, a bullet sparked off the rear glass. It didn't shatter. It just left a white pit, bulletproof. I smiled for the first time that night. They're biting. Elena, I'm heading into the industrial corridor. Good, she replied. Stay in the light. We need their drones to see you clearly. You have to be the brightest target in the city. I ripped through the heart of the warehouse district, the tires screaming on the asphalt. The bike was joined by 2 black sedans, their sirens silent but their intent loud. They tried to box me in, but I knew these streets better than any GPS. I feinted to turn toward the docks, then slammed the brakes and pulled a hard U-turn through a narrow loading bay. The sedans overshot, tires smoke screeching as they tried to recover. 1-0 for the tow guy, I whispered. Don't get cocky. Joxelena's voice was tense. They're deploying a secondary team at the 4th Street Bridge. They've realized you're a decoy? They're going to try to disable the vehicle rather than follow it. If they stop you, they'll realize the SUV is empty in seconds. I looked at the bridge ahead. A heavy-duty garbage truck was moving to block both lanes. It was a wall of steel. Elena, the bridge is closed. I'm going to have to improvise. There's a pedestrian ramp to the left. It's narrow, but the armored frame can take the hit. I saw a concrete walkway barely wide enough for a sedan, let alone a mid-sized SUV. I didn't slow down. I aimed the silver nose of the car at the railing and braced for impact. The sound of metal screaming against concrete filled the cab as the SUV squeezed through, the side mirrors shearing off and a spray of sparks. We were airborne for a heartbeat before slamming back onto the pavement. I'm through, but the steering is pulling hard to the left, I panted, fighting the wheel. The SUV was vibrating, a warning light flashing on the dash. You're half a mile from the refinery, Jocks. The syndicate is converging. They think you're trapped. I looked ahead at the rusted towers of the old refinery. It was a graveyard of pipes and chemical tanks. Elena was waiting there with the cleanup crew. But were they there to save me, or to finish the job the syndicate started? I drove into the refinery's main gate, the SUV groaning with every turn. The 3 sedans were right on my bumper now, their grills battered and their headlights smashed. I reached the center of the complex, a wide, open plaza surrounded by massive oil drums. I'm here, Elena. Where are you? Silence. The earpiece was dead. Static filled my ear like the sound of 1,000 locusts. Elena. Deadpool. Elena. I slammed the SUV into park and dived out just as the 3 sedans screeched to a halt, surrounding me. 6 men stepped out, their weapons leveled at my chest. The giant with the scarred face, the one from the pier, walked toward me. He wasn't wearing tactical gear anymore. He was wearing the colors of the rival syndicate. The variable, he mocked, the scar on his face twisting into a grin. Elena really thought she could hide a mole in her own house. My heart stopped. Elena wasn't the savior, she was the target, and I had just led her executioner straight to her. Where is she? I asked, my voice a low growl. The giant laughed, tapping his gun against his chin. She's in the tower, watching the show. Or she was, before my team reached her. Now, give me the chip she gave you, or I'll start by taking your fingers. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the small, silver locket. I don't have it, I lied. The giant stepped forward and backhanded me, the blow sending me spinning into the dirt. I tasted blood. Don't lie to me, Togai. I saw her hand it to you through the villa's cameras. He reached down to grab me, but a sudden, blinding searchlight cut through the darkness from above. A helicopter roared over the refinery, the downdraft kicking up a storm of dust and debris. Drop your weapons. A voice boomed from the sky. It wasn't the police. The helicopter was unmarked, matte black and lethal. It opened fire not on me, but on the syndicate sedans. The plaza erupted in a symphony of explosions and gunfire. The giant dove for cover, but a sniper round from the chopper found its mark, throwing him back against the silver SUV. In the chaos, a door opened in the shadows of the nearby tower. Elena emerged, her hair disheveled and a submachine gun in her hands. Jocks, get to the SUV, she screamed over the roar of the rotors. I didn't ask questions. I scrambled into the passenger seat as she slid into the driver's side. The engine was still running. She floored it, the SUV lurching over the wreckage of the syndicate cars. The giant. He said you were the mole, I yelled. He was the mole, she countered, her eyes focused on the exit. He tried to take the tower, but I had a failsafe. The chopper is mine, mostly. We tore out of the refinery, the helicopter providing a lethal escort. The chip, Jocks. Tell me you still have it. I pulled the silver locket from my pocket. I have it. But the boss? He wants us dead, doesn't he? Elena didn't look at me. She just kept her eyes on the road. The boss is a businessman, and businessmen change their minds when the profit margins shift. We're going to negotiate with the reporter. We reached a quiet park overlooking the city. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the skyline in shades of bruised purple and gold. Elena stopped the car and looked at me, the adrenaline finally leaving her. We're not going to a safe house, Jocks. We're going to a newsroom. If this chip goes live, the cartel is finished, the syndicate is exposed, and we might actually get to see tomorrow. She handed me her phone. Call the number. I took the phone, my thumb hovering over the dial button. The city below was waking up, oblivious to the fact that its entire power structure was sitting on a microchip in my pocket. Once I hit this, there's no going back, I said. Elena leaned her head against the headrest, her eyes closed. Jocks, there hasn't been a back since you hooked that SUV. We either change the world, or we let it bury us. I pressed call. The voice on the other end was sharp, caffeinated and skeptical. This is Miller, Daily Ledger. Who is this? I looked at Elena. She nodded. I have the insurance policy, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. The one from Pier 41? If you want the truth about the boss and the cartel moles, meet us at the old cathedral on 5th. Come alone, or the chip goes into the river. The silence on the line lasted 5 seconds. I'm on my way. We reached the cathedral at dawn. The stone walls were cold and smelled of ancient incense and dust. Elena paced the nave, her hand never leaving her holster. Miller is clean, but his shadow might not be, she whispered. The boss has ears everywhere. If he knows we're here, he'll send the whole cavalry. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors groaned open. A man in a crumpled suit stepped into the light. I'm Miller. Show me the goods. Elena didn't move. Check the perimeter first. Jocks. I walked to the high-arched windows, looking down at the street. My heart plummeted. A line of matte black SUVs was pulling up, silent as a funeral procession. They weren't syndicate. They were the boss's personal guard. The elite were burned, I yelled. Miller's eyes went wide. I wasn't followed, I swear. Elena grabbed him by the collar. It doesn't matter. They didn't follow you. They tracked the phone. The crypt, Elena commanded, grabbing my arm. There's a tunnel that leads to the sewer system. It's our only shot. We scrambled down the stone stairs as the front doors of the cathedral were blown off their hinges. The sound of tactical boots echoed through the sanctuary like thunder. We were trapped in a tomb, clutching $1 billion secret, while the most powerful man in the city sent his reapers to collect the bill. The crypt was a labyrinth of stone coffins and damp air. Which way? I panted, the flashlight beam dancing over skeletons. Elena checked a compass on her watch. South toward the river. Behind us, we heard the rhythmic thud, dash, thud, thud of silent submachine guns. They weren't calling out. They were just clearing the rooms. Miller was trembling so hard he could barely walk. I just wanted a lead, he whispered. I didn't want a grave. We reached a heavy iron grate. Beyond it, the roar of the city's sewer system sounded like a waterfall. Help me lift this. I jammed a crowbar I'd swiped from the SUV into the gap. Elena and I strained, the metal groaning until it finally gave way. We dropped into the dark, cold water, just as a flashlight beam hit the wall above us. They're in the pipe, a voice shouted. A spray of bullets hissed into the water beside my head. We ran through the sludge, the smell of rot filling my lungs. We need to get to the main junction, Elena shouted over the roar of the water. There's a service ladder that leads to the subway tracks. I looked at Miller. He was falling behind, his face pale with shock. I grabbed him by the belt and hauled him forward. I wasn't just a tow truck driver anymore. I was the weight that kept this whole desperate mission from drifting away. We reached the junction, a massive circular room where 4 tunnels met. The service ladder was a rusted iron spine leading up into the dark. You first, Miller, go. I shoved the reporter onto the rungs. Elena followed, her gun pointed down the tunnel we'd just left. Red laser dots began to dance on the walls around us. They were close. Too close. Jocks, get up there, she screamed, firing a burst into the darkness. I climbed, the rusted metal biting into my palms. I reached the top and pulled a heavy manhole cover aside. We were in a subway maintenance tunnel, the air vibrating with the hum of a distant train. The 3rd Street station is half a mile east, Elena said, her face covered in grime. If we can reach the platform, we can lose ourselves in the morning commute. They won't shoot in a crowd of 1,000 people. We sprinted along the tracks, the 3rd rail glowing with a lethal blue light. Behind us, the manhole cover we'd just left clattered to the floor. They were through. We reached the end of the tunnel and saw the lights of the 3rd Street platform. It was packed with office workers and students, a sea of normal lives oblivious to the war beneath their feet. We climbed onto the platform, our wet, dirty clothes drawing stares from the crowd. Acts natural, Elena whispered, tucking her gun into her waistband. We blend into a group of commuters. Miller clutched his briefcase like a life raft. I saw 2 men in gray suits enter the station from a street level. They weren't looking for a train. They were scanning the faces. They're here, I said, my heart hammering. Elena, they're blocking the exits. She looked at the tracks. A train was pulling in. Get on. No. The doors hissed open, and we pushed our way into the crowded car. The gray suits saw us. They started to run, shoving people aside. The doors began to close. One of the suits jammed his arm in the gap. His eyes locked on mine. I didn't think I used the only skill I had, brute strength. I slammed my shoulder into the door, forcing it shut. The suit's arm snapped back, and the train lurched forward, pulling us into the safety of the tunnel. Miller collapsed onto his seat, gasping for air. I have enough for the front page, he panted. The encryption keys, the moles. I just need to get to a secure terminal. Elena looked at the windows of the train. We were moving fast, but the boss's reach was faster. He'll have the next station blocked, she said. We can't stay on this train. Jocks, do you know how to operate the emergency brakes? I have towed enough trains to know how they stop, I said, a jagged, witty smile forming, but it's going to be a rough ride. I reached for the red handle above the door. If we jump in the tunnel, we can reach the old ghost station, the one they closed in the 70s. It's not on the modern maps. Elena grabbed a handrail. Do it. I pulled the handle. The world turned into a screaming, sparking nightmare of grinding metal. The train screeched to a halt with a violence that threw every passenger to the floor. In the chaos of the smoke and the shouting, we slipped through the emergency door and into the pitch-black tunnel. This way, I shouted, leading them toward a narrow gap in the brickwork. It was a maintenance crawlspace I'd seen on an old city layout years ago. Behind us, the light of tactical flashlights began to sweep the tracks. The boss's men were already moving. We stumbled into the ghost station. It was a tomb of 1970s tile and rusted turnstiles, frozen in time and covered in decades of soot. The air was stagnant, smelling of iron and old secrets. They won't expect us to stay underground, Miller whispered, his voice echoing too loudly. Elena checked her tablet. They're jamming the signal again. We can't upload from here. Jocks, is there a surface exit that doesn't lead to a main street? The old freight elevator, I recalled, pointing to a shadow in the corner. It used to haul coal to the basement of the department store above. If it still has power, we can bypass the street-level security entirely. We reached the elevator, a cage of rusted wire and grease. I grabbed the manual crank and pulled. It didn't move. I threw my entire weight into it, my muscles screaming. With a sickening groan of metal on metal, the gears finally began to turn. The elevator ascended at a snail's pace, the cables vibrating with a tension that felt like they could snap at any second. Through the mesh, I saw the different levels of the city's substructure passing by pipes, cables, and the hidden veins of New York. We're almost there, I panted. Suddenly, the elevator jerked and stopped. A red light flashed on the control panel. They cut the power, Elena hissed. We're trapped in the shaft. The hatch. I pointed to the ceiling of the cage. I climbed onto Miller's shoulders and shoved the metal panel open. We scrambled onto the roof of the elevator, the dark shaft stretching up another 20 feet toward a sliver of moonlight. We have to climb the cable, Elena said. I looked at Milner. He was shaking, staring into the abyss below. I can't do it, Jocks. I'm a writer, not an acrobat. I grabbed his hand. Today, you're both. Move. We reached the top, our hands slick with grease and blood. I kicked open the basement door and we burst into the deserted loading dock of a bankrupt department store. It was a wasteland of mannequins and empty boxers. The roof, Elena said. We need altitude for the upload. If we can reach the broadcast antenna, we can bypass the boss's local jammers. We sprinted for the stairs, the sound of a hovering chopper growing louder outside. We reached the roof, the cold wind whipping Elena's hair across her face. The city was a grid of light below us, but the sky was filled with a matte black helicopter, the same one from the refinery. It wasn't Elena's this time. Get to the antenna, she yelled, sliding behind a brick chimney as a hail of bullets tore into the roof. Miller scrambled toward the transmitter, fumbling with the microchip. I need 30 seconds, he screamed over the roar. I looked at Elena. She was out of ammunition. She looked at me, a silent goodbye in her eyes as she reached for a flare gun, her last desperate weapon. I realized I wasn't going to let this end in a fireball. I looked at the heavy industrial crane used for window washing. It was positioned right over the ledge. Elena, distract the pilot. I'm going to give them a dead pull. She didn't ask how. She stood up and fired the flare. The flare blinded the pilot for a split second, the chopper veering wildly. I jumped into the crane's cab and slammed the release lever. The massive steel counterweight, weighing 5 tons, dropped like a stone. It was still attached to the high-tension cable. As it fell, it acted as a whip, the steel line snapping upward with a force that could shear through a bridge. The cable cut the chopper's tail rotor with a sound like a thunderclap. The helicopter spun out of control. The tail rotor shattered. The pilot tried to compensate, but the physics of the dead pull were unforgiving. The chopper slammed into the side of an adjacent, empty warehouse, erupting in a spectacular plume of orange flame. The shockwave knocked me off my feet, but I didn't care. I looked at Miller. The progress bar on his screen hit 100%. It's gone, he whispered. The whole world just got the email. Across the city, the lights in the boss's skyscrapers began to blink out. In newsrooms, police stations, and government offices, the names of the moles and the location of the offshore billions were appearing on every screen. The empire wasn't just fallen, it was being deleted. Elena walked over to me, her hand resting on my shoulder as we watched the digital wildfire spread. You did it, Jocks. You finally finished the pull. The police arrived 10 minutes later, not the moles, but a tactical unit led by a commissioner whose name was not on the chip. They didn't come with guns drawn. They came with questions. Miller stepped forward, holding the tablet like a shield. I'm Miller, Daily Ledger. I have the full deposition ready. But first, he pointed to us, these two need a doctor. And a very, very good lawyer. The aftermath was a blur. The boss was arrested at the airport, trying to board a private jet that had already been grounded by the FAA. The cartel moles were rounded up in a single night. The insurance policy had worked. Elena and I spent 3 days in a safe house. This one, actually safe, being debriefed by the Department of Justice. They're offering you witness protection, Jocks, Elena said one evening, looking out at the skyline. Witness protection? Do you mean I have to move to a farm in the middle of nowhere and pretend I'm a tractor salesman? I laughed, a real, weary sound. Elena sat down beside me. It's that or stay here and wait for the remnants of the syndicate to find you. You're a hero, Jocks, but heroes don't usually get to keep their old lives. I looked at my hands. The grease was finally gone, but the scars were permanent. What about you? I'm going to a place they can't find me, she said, sliding a new passport across the table. It was a South Side address. I blinked. You moving to my neighborhood? She gave me a witty, obsidian-eyed smile. I heard they need a new dispatcher for the local tow company, someone who knows how to handle high-stress logistics. I laughed, pulling her closer. The tow truck was gone, but the partner was staying. The dead pull was finally over. The DOJ safe house was officially decommissioned. The boss was in a high-security wing of a federal prison, and the insurance policy had wiped out every cartel mole from the docks to the governor's mansion. I stood on the sidewalk of the South Side, the familiar smell of exhaust and cheap coffee hitting me like a warm embrace. My old towing yard was a hollow shell, but the ground was still mine. So, I said, looking at Elena. First day on the job. Elena was leaning against a brand-new heavy-duty flatbed truck, a gift from the DOJ for our cooperation. It was painted a vibrant, defiant yellow. She wasn't wearing a suit anymore. She had on a grease-stained jumpsuit with a name tag that read, L. The logistics are messy. Jocks, she said, checking a tablet. We have 3 illegal parkers on 5th and a city councilman who thinks his permit allows him to block an ambulance bay. Where do we start? I climbed into the driver's seat, the smell of new leather and diesel filling my lungs. It felt right. We start with the councilman, I said, shifting into gear. I've spent my life being the predator of the curb. It's time I started being the conscience. Elena hopped into the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the street with the same intensity she'd used to dodge snipers. She's trying not to jump any bridges today. The suspension on this thing is expensive. The witty reversal was complete. The cartel was a memory, and the syndicate was in ruins. But for Jocks and Elena, the game had just shifted to a smaller, more satisfying board. We spent our days cleaning up the streets we once feared. Miller's front-page story, The Ghost of Pier 41, had turned us into local legends. People didn't curse when they saw the yellow truck anymore. They nodded in respect. We were the cleaners the city actually needed. One afternoon, a sleek black sedan pulled into the yard. My heart skipped a beat, the old muscle memory of the chase returning. But the window rolled down to reveal Miller, looking well-rested and holding a Pulitzer-winning smile. "I have a lead," he said, handing a folder through the window. "A new developer is trying to buy up the waterfront using offshore shell companies. The signature looks ... familiar." Elena took the folder, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the documents. "It's a Vance subsidiary," she whispered. "A legacy account the boss kept hidden for his retirement? If they buy that land, they own the port again." I looked at the winch control on the dash. "I guess the asset isn't quite finished yet." Miller nodded. "The city needs its ghosts, jocks, and I need a follow-up story." We didn't need a billion-dollar SUV this time. We just needed a well-placed tow. We waited until the developer's lead lawyer was in a private meeting at a high-end restaurant. His car, a custom Italian sports car, was parked in a red zone. I backed the yellow truck up, hooked the frame, and hoisted it into the air in under 30 seconds. It was the smoothest pull of my life. Inside the trunk, tucked into a hidden compartment, we found exactly what Miller needed: the original deeds for the waterfront, signed under duress. The developer wasn't buying the land, he was stealing it. I dropped the car at the impound lot and handed the keys to the officer on duty, a man whose name was definitely not on the cartel's list. "Illegal parking is a serious offense, officer," I said with a wink. The story broke the next morning. The developer fled the country, and the waterfront was turned into a public park. Yachts and Elena became the unstoppable tow. We weren't just hauling cars, we were hauling the truth. The city was finally breathing, the shadows retreating as the dead pole became a symbol of a new kind of justice. The kind that comes with a hydraulic winch and a very sharp eye for detail. As 2026 rolled toward its final months, the South Side began to change. New businesses opened, the crime rate dropped, and the ghost station below 3rd Street was officially turned into a historical museum. I took Elena there on a Friday night. We stood on the rusted platform where we'd once run for our lives. "It looks smaller with the lights on," she noted, her hand in mine. "Everything does once you stop running from it," I replied. We sat in the cab of the yellow truck, watching the sun set over the harbor. The water was calm, the freighter from that night long gone to some distant port. "Do you ever miss the adrenaline?" I asked. Elena looked at the tablet in her lap, which was currently showing a 3-car pileup on the expressway that needed our help. "I think I've had enough specialist work for a lifetime. Jocks, I like the logistics of a clear road better." The radio crackled to life. "Unit 1, we have a blocked hydrant on Main. Owners being ... difficult." I looked at Elena and she gave me that witty, obsidian-eyed smile. "Difficulty is just a veritable. Jocks, let's go solve it." I hit the lights, the amber glow reflecting in the windows of the city we'd saved. We weren't the predator and the executioner anymore. We were Jocks and Elena, and the road was finally ours. The final pull of the year was a simple one: a broken-down van on the side of the highway, belonging to a family trying to get home for the holidays. I hooked him up and towed him to the nearest station, refusing to take a cent for the service. "Consider it an insurance policy," I told the father. He didn't understand the reference, but he understood the kindness. We returned to the yard as the first snow of the winter began to fall. The yellow truck looked like a beacon in the whiteout. I turned off the engine, the silence of the South Side feeling like a victory. We had outrun the cartel, outplayed the boss, and outlasted the shadows. The dead pull was over, but the story of the tow truck driver and the asset was just beginning. I looked at the silver locket on the dashboard. It was empty now, the microchip long since turned into a mountain of evidence. But it stayed there as a reminder: never underestimate the person who takes your car. They might just be the one who saves your life. I looked at Elena, her face soft in the glow of the dash lights. "You ready for 2027? I asked. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "As long as you're driving." The lights of the city hummed in the distance, a sprawling grid of millions of people who had no idea how close they'd come to the edge. We were the ghosts who kept the machines running. We were the variables that balanced the equation. And as the snow covered the tracks of the yellow truck, I knew that for the first time in my life, I wasn't just pulling a load. I was home.